Yeah.
Tēnā rā tātou katoa, mihi tūtahi ki tō tātou kaihanga. Nāna nei, homai te waiho me te haure, kore kore ai o tātou tinana, ai tāra mā tātou ki tēnei ao, the klori, tūna ngā tapu. Nuru e ngā mati e piko ane kia koutou ngā mati hae. Haere ki te pitahi kama o rehua ngā mati hae ri atu rā, a kāti ki a koutou. E te hungore tau nei tēnā koutou. E te mana whenua, ngā karangatanga hapu, kei te mihatu ki a koutou. E te tiamana o te Komiti Māori, tēnā koe, i mihi ana ki a koe. Me koutou hoki, ngā mema o te kaunihira, me ngā kaimahi, tēnei te mea tuki a koutou. Ki a koutou ngā manuhiri, ngā mema o te hāpuri, kei te mihi atu ki a koutou. Nau mai hara mai ki te karama te kaupapa o te rā. Nau mai hara mai, piki mai, kake mai, whakatau mai. E kara ki a potomo tātou, kei noi tātou. He honora e he kōre ki te atu he maunga rongo ki te mako ta whenua e whakaaro pai ki ngā tāna tutoa. Ange te atu e ngā kauhau ki roto ki tēnā o mātou. Whakatongi o tō wairu o tapu hei a whina hei tō i a mātou mahi. O mātou whiti whakaaro, whiti kōrero i runga te kaupapa e mui a tātou i tēnei rā. Mō reira e pā. Kōri ki tōna ngā tapu. Amen.
Tēnā tātou katoa. Ngā mihi ki a koutou mō te tuatahi o tātou hui o Komiti Māori mō tēnei tau. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia a koe te taru, ngā mihi ki a koe ki te whakatuwhera a tātou hui. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Just housekeeping for the councillors. I just want to remind councillors that the public section of this meeting is recorded and live streamed. The webcast will be archived and made publicly available on council's website within 2 days after each meeting for a period of 3 years. Our purpose is to provide greater access to council debate, decision making, and encouraging openness and transparency. However, council accepts no responsibility in any individual opinions or statements. This is in accordance with council's live streaming and recording of meeting protocols, which can be viewed on council's website. I also remind all present that local government decision making affords no protection to councillors, council officers and the public for comments made during meetings that are subsequently challenged in a court of law and determined to be slanderous. Councillors who are on Zoom, please ensure your videos are turned on, and if you wish to speak, please raise your electronic hand and turn on the microphone. Thank you. I'd like to now call for apologies. What I currently have at the moment is apologies from Councillor Thurston and Councillor Thompson, Councillor Crosby for lateness, and the Chair for lateness as well. Are there any other apologies to be recorded? No. Can I please have a movement seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ward-Darlton, Councillor Iti. Thank you. The public forum, none advised. Items on the agenda, none advised. Order of business, no change advised today. Declaration of conflicts of interest. Do we have any conflicts on the table? There are none. Thank you. Our presentation today, we have 3 groups presenting. Our first presentations will be our students, which are all looking forward. Can I please call the students to join us at the table, please? I'm then going to hand the rākau to Kataraina to introduce our students as they present. Kia koe, Kataraina.
Tēnā koe te tiongana, tēnā hoki koutou, nā kai kaunihira, our councillors, and tēnā koutou, nā kaimahi, me nā manuhiri mā. So just greetings to everyone. We're so excited. We're really fortunate that our council has a summer assistant program. It's been running for several years, and we have such an amazing cohort of students that come through this organisation, Toi Moana, and many of them actually end up working with us at some point in time. And so they were super excited to be given the opportunity to present to our councillors. We do have two that are going to be presenting online. They all have presentations and they're all a little bit shy, but they're super excited at the same time. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. We do have an order that Shari will go through for our students to just know mai haramai.
Testing. Kia ora tātou, Chair, councillors and staff. Ko tarawera te manga, ko kaituna te awa no makitu aho, ko Riddell toku whānau, ko Macy toku ingoa. I am from Makitu, between the Kaituna River and Mount Tarawera. My name is Macy Riddell. My study took place at University of Waikato in both Hamilton and Tauranga. I studied the Bachelor of Science, majoring in Environmental Science and Psychology, both of which were very fascinating subjects. I have really enjoyed the opportunities and experiences I have had here at Toi Moana. My role consisted in the complaints response team with a great bunch of people, Bonnie, Matt, Jackie and Ange, under two awesome, caring and supporting people, team leader Trudy and manager Stephen. My role consisted of assisting the team with responding to complaints received through the pollution hotline from the public within the entire Bay of Plenty region. Some of the complaints I have been able to assist with include using radars to find cars that had been run off the road into the awa, using sieves to clean out what we call nurdles. We'll hand these around. They had washed up on Waihi Beach during the storm. I also got to attend oil and diesel spills into our freshwater and estuarine environments, and if you would believe it, a lot of dead animals in our waterways. The primary goal of actioning these complaints is to remediate the effect they have on the hauora of our people and whenua, specifically in relation to the RMA. Alongside this, I did some mahi with the wider compliance team, including overseeing consent conditions, dairy inspections, and sample analysis data for the business levels of compliance. I was also given the opportunity to visit some interesting sites with team members which hold consents with the Regional Council. This included Balance, Fonterra, and just yesterday, the Kawerau Geothermal Power Plant. In the near future, in terms of my career goals, I hope to continue my employment with the Regional Council, as it is a journey that I have really enjoyed. I intend on taking opportunities as they come to me to gain experience and enhance my knowledge to be able to give back into a permanent role in the future that benefits the Bay of Plenty region. Kia pai o koutou rā, and ngā mihi for listening.
Thank you, Macy. Lovely kōrero. We're going to take questions at the end, if that's all right, councillors. Thank you.
Were there some slides? Kia ora Chair, kia ora councillors, kia ora staff, kia ora koutou, kia ora tātou. Nā uriki oku tipona, nā tauranga toku whānau, ko Josh toku ingoa, ki te whariwananga o Auckland, aho, ki te ako. So this summer I've been thankful and grateful to be involved with the Emergency Management Bay of Plenty staff. A little bit of an overview of my experience is what I'm going to talk about here. But first, I'm just going to tell you a little bit more about myself. Do I have the clicker here? So previously, my background, I've done a diploma in outdoor education and guiding. As I said, I'm at Auckland University and I'm studying a Bachelor of Science in Geography and GIS. And I'm really passionate about disaster risk reduction. So it's sort of the field that I want to work in. Around New Zealand, there aren't any other summer assistant intern opportunities in disaster management or emergency management fields. So this is really nationally held quite high. And yeah, like I said, super grateful to have been involved in this one. Thank you. Experience was split with part in the planning team and then part in the operational team. The last few weeks with Cyclone Gabrielle, it has got a little bit murky, I will be honest. And then in the middle, it was a fantastic summertime, making the most of being in the bay, which was wicked. So in the planning team, it consisted of a lot of reading to start off with, but that was, in the end, really valuable because it meant straight away I could get into some really good toolboxing discussions and workshops around our group plan. If you mind stopping, flipping slides, perfect. I don't know how, I feel like my involvement was valuable, but we'll see what the final draft of the group plan looks like. I'm sure you've all got your hands on it, or you will get your hands on it at some point, but it's a really awesome document and it's taken a really good turn from the last one. So, perfect. The next thing I was involved in was the group recovery plan. Now, this recovery plan is, our current one is from 2015, so it is slightly outdated. And my task was to take the flavor of all those other documents you can see on the left of the slides up there and turn it into something new. I have only scoped this project and I'd like to be involved with it further, but we'll see what happens. The main thing it was missing was community engagement. So that's, as you can imagine, as you can see at the moment, community engagement is really important in recovery. So we're going to try and get that into the new recovery plan. I've also been involved with a whole bunch of national legislation that's been coming out. I drafted some submissions for the Natural and Built Environment and Spatial Planning Act with an emergency management lens. So I believe we've made submissions on those and we'll see what happens, see if we're called for a hearing. But there's some really awesome provisions in there that will allow for emergency management in the future to be better. The next thing I was dragged into was the Tsunami Ready program. As I'm sure you're aware, in the Bay, we're currently undergoing an explore of what we can do better in the tsunami space. And what I was tasked with was creating a centrally located database for the tsunami signage information in the Bay, because there wasn't one before. So that involved a survey, a map, a user guide, and of course a road trip to the Bay to find the signs which weren't online at all. A big part of that was all the background GIS stuff, which I've put together here. You can see on the slide, you've got the map, you've got the tsunami inundation zones, and it gives you a really good overview of what is in the Bay. From there, I did a little bit of spatial analysis, and this is just a picture of Mount Maunganui, and you can see there's tsunami zone overlaid on top of the spatial planning zones of TCC, and we can see where the information evacuation signs are, and from there we can decide what we want to do, where we need more signs, etc. Then the last few weeks, I've been we've been almost in a bit of a response since the Auckland flooding. We've been monitoring, we've been supporting, and I've been pretty heavily involved in that. This picture is from 10 p.m. on Monday night. So kind of in the thick of Cyclone Gabrielle, and I'm in the background there in a blue vest briefing the room on what the tides are and the weather. It's all very exciting. Yes, my facial hair has changed since then. Part of that, I was in the intelligence team, so getting intelligence in and pushing things out. And I've been helping to update our geospatial experience. So if you've ever been into the coordination centre when we are responding to something or monitoring, you'll see this up on the screen. And thankfully, we've got it to a point where all of the TLAs have got it up in their operation centres as well. And they're inputting data into it. Really awesome tool. With that as well, I've created a briefing tool from it. So information gets put in there and it gets put onto this briefing page. That gives us a really easy way to get an overview of the region, as well as all of the TLAs to be able to look through their information. And we've also created an open source photo survey. What that means is the next time there's an event, we're going to be able to push out this survey to whoever we want to, probably to start with regional council staff and then whoever else we need to. and they're going to be able to give us live images from the region as well, which is going to be great for situational awareness. That is what I've been involved in. A few things, a wide range of things as well. But really, I just wanted to say thank you. Thank you all for making it happen. Without this opportunity, you know, a lot of people who want to get into emergency management wouldn't have the chance to do that. It's national knows this happens at the national level, and they're all about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Josh. That was awesome. I'm going to go on to George now.
Got it. I believe we have a slide as well. We've got the remote working too. Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou, ngā mema o Komiti Māori, ko George Bajan ahau. He tauira, raumati, mō te tīma land management. Kia ora, my name is George. I'm from Matamata, over the Kāmais. I have studied environmental management at Toiopamai, and on Monday I start my final year of a Bachelor of Science at Waikato University. This summer I've been working with Toi Moana's land management team in Rotorua, and I'd like to share with you some of the mahi I've been doing with a slideshow I prepared yesterday. So this wasn't the mahi I was doing this summer. This was last summer. This might actually be last spring, to be honest. But I come from a farming background, and I have milked more cows than you've had hot dinners, I'd say. But the land management team has been really great to work with. Here we go. So one of my cool difficulties. There we go. One of my first roles was less of a role and more of a privilege. We got to go up onto the top of Mount Tarawera and pull out some pine trees. And the area where we were working was actually quite a tapu area. So we had a bit of a kōrero and a blessing before we went up. And it was really special and a real privilege to be up there looking after the whenua. This pine tree probably appears, I was treating it like a fish. So it's probably not as big as it looks in the photo. My main role at council over the summer was to inspect or audit retirement areas, and these areas were an agreement that landowners had gone into by retiring land, and the council had gone into by paying the lion's share of the fencing and the planting, and sometimes compensation for loss of grazing land. And some of them were quite historic, from the 70s or 80s. And the purpose of these protection areas was to reduce soil erosion and keep stock out of the waterways, to improve the quality of the fresh water of the streams and ultimately the lakes in the area. And this property here was actually it was in very poor condition. You can see kind of in the background there's a critical source area over beneath the trees where there was a lot of mud and nutrients that could flow into the stream. There was a lot of silage wrap and rubbish on the property, and there was actually rubbish and silage wrap in the protection area in the riparian zone. They're being fenced off. There was quite major erosion further downstream, and there was also some other issues which I won't get into. They're a bit grim. So this was also the same property. When I took these photos, I didn't actually realise I'd be presenting them. I just sent that one to my girlfriend, but it was quite good. So just down the hill a little bit from the alpacas, there was a massive critical source area where the alpacas had been running around making a lot of mud, and then that mud had been flowing into the Waititi stream. So it was good that I kind of got out there to go inspect the area, and then it drew some attention to this property, and the land management officer is now working quite hard to improve its integrity. We did actually work hard. I just wanted to include this photo because this kind of shows the opportunity I had to engage with people within the council, and I got a really good insight into what individuals' role within the council were, and then what the council's role was as well. And it was a great insight for me to learn more about land management and nutrient management and the different tools available. I didn't know that photo was being taken. Another one of my roles was to take water quality samples of the Waititi stream. And the Waititi stream was in the first property with the ducks and the alpacas, and they had a deteriorating water quality. Each time they sampled the water, it had more and more E. coli in it. So they wanted to do a high frequency monitoring program to get a better idea of what was going on. I also focused a lot of my audits on the farms that contributed to the Waititi stream to see if I could find some pollution sources. So that's a good photo. And then another one of my roles was to help do some soil sampling at a proposed wetland. And it was really exciting because this wetland, they wanted to quantify how much nutrients the wetland could absorb. They were reinstating the wetland. And in Rotorua, they do a lot of nutrient management for the farms to improve the water quality of the lake. So they wanted to quantify how much nutrients the wetland could pull out of or stop getting into the lake. And so if a farm installed a wetland or reinstated a wetland, they could include the nutrients that it was sequestering into their farm nutrient budget, which improves the quality of the lake and encourages landowners to install wetlands. And I believe we have a masterclass on how to push out the soil samples. That is a good technique. It's really difficult when it's quite sludgy. You might not appreciate how hard that was. But just while I've got the microphone, I'd really like to thank everyone at Toi Moana for the opportunity to work and learn and grow and engage over the summer. I've really, really enjoyed my time here. I feel like I've contributed to Toi Moana's cause, and I've definitely taken a lot away from it. Thank you, ngā mihi. That's all bye.
Kia ora, George, thank you for that. We've got, I think our last two speakers are going to be tag teaming, one online and one in person. So kia ora, wahine
Testing. Tēnā rā tātou kua rau ki mai nei I raro I te turanei o tō tātou whare, Morena, Madam Chair and councillors. Ko te ana hau, he uri tēnei no te aroa whānui, ngā tūhoi, ngā tirunga mai wahine huki. Kei marere and I, she's online. We're in the Te Amorangi team, the Māori policy, so we're both presenting for the team. So I'm currently studying a Bachelor of Law with a second major in Māori and Indigenous Studies at the University of Waikato. This is my last year. So I've been fortunate enough to get the placement with the Māori policy team and have had amazing experience and great opportunity to engage with different levels of knowledges on law and engagement with tangata whenua. So in this presentation, Kei Marere and I will be sharing a few things that we've done together and we've done individually with our different officers for the Te Amorangi team. Kei Marere o te.
Tēnā tātou katoa, Ata Māori and Madam Chair, Morena councillors. Ko waio, here tēnei no Ngāti Ranginui, Ngāti Pūkenga ki Manaia, Ngāti Tūwharetoa, Ngāti Porou Hoki, ki Tauranga Moana, ko Ngāti Kahu me Ngai Tamarawa ho o Kuhapu, ko Kei Marere Tibble Brown tōku ingoa. So yes, as alongside Tiana, I've also had the honour of being a summer assistant with the Te Amorangi team, but I was based in the Tauranga office. I'm currently back down in England for my studies, so I apologise for not being able to make it in person today. I'm currently going into my final year as well of a Bachelor of Health Sciences, majoring in Public Health and minoring in Māori Health here at the University of Otago. My interest in this area has come from a desire to give back to the communities that have helped raise me, so my hub and iwi, as well as a passion that I have for social justice and ensuring equity for our people. And so with my degree, I hope to gain experience at both the national and international level in the public health sector, to ultimately come back and best awhi mai hapu and iwi to be able to achieve their greatest aspirations. Kia ora.
Yeah, so we just got a short presentation. So this is our team at Christmas party. Yeah. So Kei Marere and I did a sort of report on researching national Māori policies, national Māori councillors that are Māori, and whether they are in the city council, district council, or any unitary authorities throughout Aotearoa, New Zealand. I have brought a plan on a page, a sort of infograph to show you all that we can show later. But to gather the information, we had to research on how many Māori councillors there were, whether those Māori councillors were on new or existing wards, whether they are female or male, whether they are a mayor or deputy mayor, and their affiliation as well, whether they affiliate to Te Aroa or Tainui or Makatua. So this data could go on to form a big picture to view of Māori in local government, potentially to form a resource to be used for both toi moana and other councillors or within the public as well. Our second one, I managed to do a report with my advisor, Sandy, about the national statistics on iwi Māori representation in local government. So this report was to identify on how many Māori councillors or how many Māori representatives that are on a community board or a committee. Nationally, yeah, and throughout Rotorua. The data we collected, we had to see on who or on the individual committees or community boards, and we had to gather whether they were Māori or not. And if they were Māori, we had to find out if they had any delegated powers, such as decision-making powers or advisory, voting, approval, or recommendation rights, as well as their remuneration and whether they get remunerated or not. And I found that interesting because I wanted to know if there were any iwi representatives that got remunerated that were on a committee or community board. Okay, Marires too.
Kia ora, Tiana. So the bulk of my mahi was in relation to smart growth and involved reporting to an incredible wahine Māori, Alva Conroy, who's pictured in that picture on the right. And she's actually now working with toi moana in the spatial planning team. For those of us who might not know, smart growth is essentially a partnership and collaboration between local communities, tangata whenua, local governments such as the Bay of Plenty Regional Council and Tauranga City Council, and national agencies such as Waka Kotahi, working together essentially to provide a unified vision for the Western Bay of Plenty's future. And so as most of us will know, the Bay of Plenty is quickly growing, and so smart growth is trying to bring people together to make sure that facilitating this growth is done in the best way possible. Next slide, please. So my mahi was mostly around the Tangata Whenua Spatial Plan, or the TWSP. A reality throughout Aotearoa, as well as within the Bay of Plenty, is that tangata whenua voices often go unheard in the urban development space, which is why we end up with retirement villages on wāhi tapu and traditional food gathering places displaced by pollution. And so the Tangata Whenua Spatial Plan is an effort to make sure that these things stop happening and that local Māori of the Western Bay of Plenty are able to communicate their wants and needs for their whenua and for their future generations. And so as you can see on the screen, the 5 TWSP action areas are Te Whenua, which is around land, Te Ngākau, around marae communities being well connected to all the services they need, Te Taiao, around the well-being of the environment, Ngā Wāhi Tupuna, around protection of sites of significance, and Te Manawaroa, around being resilient in a changing climate, which is very pertinent to all the things going on right now. My contribution to this involved first reviewing and summarising the Vital Signs Youth Report 2022, which is pictured on the bottom left of the screen. The evidence presented in this report was collected from a survey of Western Bay of Plenty rangatahi on heaps of different outcomes, from health and well-being all the way to housing. Some findings were a high need for better public transport for young people to be able to access things such as education and mahi opportunities, all the way to how rangatahi view home ownership as being out of reach in contrast to generations past. And so these findings will hopefully go on to inform smart growth's planning of a future Western Bay of Plenty with things such as improved public transport and with papakainga developments for local rangatahi to be able to live in the future. Next, I completed an analysis and summary of long-term council plan submissions from Tangata Whenua, which also contain lots of aspirations local Māori have for the Western Bay of Plenty. Lots of these were around the preservation of natural environment and respect for wāhi tapu, as well as papakainga development, which was mentioned in that Vital Signs also. After this, featured in the middle, I then completed statutory acknowledgement summaries for all 5 treaty settlements of the Western Bay of Plenty iwi, including Ngāti Mākino, Ngāti Pukenga, Ngāti Rangiwewehi, Tapuika, and Waitaha. These acknowledgements detail areas of significance to each of these iwi, and I actually found it really interesting learning more about the natural environment within Tauranga Moana, such as Ōtāne Wainuku and the Waimafu estuary and all the different significances to those areas by the different iwi. These summaries will be used to inform the Tangata Whenua Spatial Plan, but will also go out to each respective iwi to make the information contained in their lengthy treaty settlements more accessible to their iwi members. Kia ora.
So this one, I was working with Jane Walden. For this mahi, we had to gather the contact information for all experts, kaitiaki or iwi members that were involved with the RRF, the Rangitaki River Forum. And then I was to come up with a couple of questions to conduct interviews with the identified experts, kaitiaki or iwi members that were involved. The purpose of this was to gather information on my tauranga of tuna, including the ecology, the distribution, and the customary management practices. This would eventually help from a bespoke cultural health index for the Rangitaki River Forum. But unfortunately, due to the busy schedules to the members and experts, haven't been able to conduct the interviews yet. For this task, included a lot of patience and communication within the iwi and hapu of the Bay of Plenty and updating their contact details. This involved updating the internal Toi Moana resources on iwi, hapu, marae, and their location. And Kay Mariri and I both worked on this one. Yeah. He mihi nui tēnei to our co-workers and to Madam Chair and the councillors for providing this opportunity for us to engage with tangata whenua and yourselves as well. Thank you.
Kia ora korua. I think we do have another speaker. Is it Kairangi online? Yes.
Hello. Kia ora, Madam Chair and councillors. Ko kakipuku te maunga, ko waipu te awa, ko tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Maniapoto te iwi, ko pare te kawa te hapu, ko kapatuhi te marae, no rotorua ahau, ko Kairangi toko ingoa. Tēnā koutou katoa. Hi, I'm Kairangi. I was the summer student for biocontrol in the Rotorua office. At the moment, I'm back at uni in Christchurch at the University of Canterbury. I'm in my 5th year of a double degree in law and biological sciences with a minor in Māori and Indigenous studies. I'm hoping to work in conservation or biosecurity or something like that. So I just have a quick PowerPoint as well with some photos of what I got up to this summer. So I was biocontrol, which is when you use living things to control other living things. So for example, instead of using a herbicide or spraying, you'd release like a bug to eat the weed. So yeah, I'll just flick through some photos. So in the first slide, sorry, I'll slow down a bit. Sorry, the next one with my pine pulling photo. There we go, sorry. Yeah, so same as George, I went out on the pine pulling day up Tarawera, which was a really amazing experience. And it was cool to see, or hear from the other people who were there saying that there was a lot less wilding pine than there was on the other years that they'd been. So on my next slide, I've just got a picture of me with the crater behind. This was really cool. Most people came running down the gravel and climbed up the other side to get out. But on the next slide, you can see the way that we went down, which was the gravel slope. And this is a picture of Shane helping Kirsty get down. And in the background, you can see Dale's helping May in the back there. So it was quite an exciting day, really. But this was not really biocontrol related. But in the next slide, this is Wink, the velvet leaf detector dog. So we went out there, and in this paddock there used to be velvet leaf, which is a really invasive weed that we're trying to stop from spreading all over the place. And Wink runs around in the paddock, and if he detects any velvet leaf, he'll sit down and bark 3 times. But luckily that didn't happen. And he didn't find any. So just in the next slide, we've got another picture of him hard at work there. It was quite cute to watch him. He's doing great work out there. And in the next slide, this was an attempt to use biocontrol to control the catfish in Lake Rotoiti. So what they did was we went out and tried to collect some big catfish for them, and then they would harvest the egg and sperm and try and create infertile males to release back into the lake to kind of mess up the breeding system. In the next photo, you can see our biggest catches. There were some pretty giant catfish in there. And in the next photo, this is just a picture of us sorting out the big catfish from the little ones. Yeah, unfortunately, this was unsuccessful. It was possible that we were a bit too late in the season, and the eggs just all died, which was upsetting, but it was a good day, and we took out about 500 catfish from the lake, so it wasn't all in vain. Next is some broom gall mite releases. So Horizons District Council had grown some gall mites on broom, and so we collected these branches and we just tied them onto some healthy broom. So hopefully what they'll do is the gall mites will spread out and start to suck the nutrients out of the broom, and hopefully they'll die. And next was some Tradescantia leaf beetle monitoring. This was my favorite. I love these little beetles. They're really cute little coppery colored things, and you can see me in that picture having a fantastic time. Yeah, so these beetles chew around the edges of the leaves, and they work really well in conjunction with the yellow leaf spot fungus, which I've got some pictures of later as well. But yeah, in the next slide, there's just a couple more pictures of the beetles hard at work. Yep, and in the next slide, we did do some broom gall mite monitoring. So for releases that were done in other years, this site, they weren't successful, but in the next slide, you can see one that was all these grey fluffy things. They're the gall mites, so they're doing really well there, sucking nutrients out. And then next slide is the yellow leaf spot fungus, which really did a great job this season, probably because it was raining so much and the fungus spores spread around really well when it rains. And then next we had the Japanese honeysuckle Honshu white admiral butterfly. And the butterfly actually doesn't really do much. It's the caterpillars that chew around the leaves. And this was the one photo I managed to get of a butterfly. It's quite difficult to get a photo of a butterfly, I must say. And then in the next slide, I've just got a picture to show how the Japanese honeysuckle kind of climbs up and strangles all the native trees. And then next slide, we've got the California green thistle beetle. They had a pretty bad season this year because of the rain, we think, but towards the end of the season, we started to see quite a lot of damage. So you can see in this picture, there's some little like windows in the leaves, and that's the beetle chewing on there. And then next slide, we have the moth plant beetle did not do well. We didn't find any damage or any beetles this year, but hopefully next year they'll get up and running. And then next slide, we also did some collection of lantana flowers because they're trying to find out where the lantana came from, basically like where it originally got into New Zealand. And in the next photo is just quite a staged photo of us collecting the lantana flowers, pretending that's what we were up to. And then I've just got a couple of slides at the end about the other stuff that I got up to. So I got to do four-wheel drive training, for example, which was super cool. And a few other things. Sorry, I'm probably going over time. And then last slide was my unfun stuff, which there are only 3 unfun things that I did, which was great. Updating the biological control of weeds book, the safety data sheets. And because I was in the depot, the printer was terrible and I had a terrible time with the printer, but that was it. Yeah. So thank you. One more slide. Yeah, thank you so much. I had a really fun time. This was my favorite job that I've done over a summer period. So yeah, I had a really good time and thank you for listening.
Ngā mihi kia koutou. I guess one of the great things that you bring to our table and to me is having a sense of knowing that our future is in good hands. So it's always good to have rangatahi and students come to share the mahi that all of us are passionate about. So I want to thank you for the work that you've done. And for those of you who are looking to seek employment with the Aberdeen Regional Council, I wish you all the luck. We look forward to all of you returning to join us in the mahi that we all strive for in this space. So, ngā mihi kia koutou. I'm going to open the floor to the councillors to see if they have questions for us. I can see Councillor White with his hand up, so we'll start with Councillor White. Councillor Lees, and we'll go from there. Thank you. And Councillor McMillan.
Ngā mihi nui kia koutou mō koutou whakāturanga pai mō koutou mahi pai. Mō reira kei te mihi atu kia koutou mō tēnā. I just wanted to just add, it's a real pleasure to have this and receive this presentation from the next generations and because the future's in your hands. And it is really, really neat to see how connected you have become to the whenua, to the issues and the challenges we face. And that level of mātauranga that you carry is going to be invaluable. And we talk about, future employment prospects. Well, I'm sure Regional Council will welcome you in the course of time. Your mahi is just absolutely great to hear, to see. It certainly warms the heart of a kōwiki. I'm in that stage now to know, as the chair has said, that it's in good hands. The future, it's in your hands. We sit around this table making decisions, but it's the connectedness you have to the work you're doing, and it can only grow stronger. That, I think, augurs well for all of us at a time when we are facing considerable challenges: climate change, environmental issues, change. I was fascinated by all your presentations. I was fascinated by that little dog that runs around the paddock trying to find the plants. He looked pretty proud of himself. Congratulations, well done. And you said it was a pleasure and a privilege to be working with council in your roles that you had. I'd argue the privilege is ours the other way. Good.
Kia ora. Thank you so much for your presentation. Karu's actually said most of what I was going to say. I guess what I want to add is that I just wish you all the very best for your future. I think that you've got very bright futures, and we're very grateful to have you working for us in our organisation. Your presentations were amazing. My key question was about Wink, the velvet leaf sniffer dog. Is he a member of staff?
For you.
His handler is called John, and he actually lives down in Dunedin. So no, you probably won't be seeing Wink around, sadly.
Thank you.
Kia ora. You guys are absolutely awesome, really inspiring, and Tautoko, everything that's been said. I've just got a question for George, actually. So in your experience, obviously you've come from a background of farming, and then you've been working with restoration and retirement, riparian planting, etc. What do you think is the biggest barrier and challenge with really onboarding the farming sector to really embrace, because we've sort of got this journey, haven't we, where some are really pioneering with best practice and others are not so keen, and there's financial barriers and all sorts. What do you think, in your experience, is our biggest challenge, and any tips for us, do you think?
Thank you. I'm not too sure if I can offer tips. I can offer my insight, but to be honest, I'd say the biggest barrier is money. I think a lot of farmers carry a really high level of debt and are committed to the production that they're making. So if you can somehow get around that, that'd be good. Personally, I'd look at legislating banks is how I'd kind of push environmental issues, but I'm not running anything.
Great, thanks a lot.
If I can add one thing though, one big factor that I took away from my experience here is that the relationship with the landowners is critical. You cannot make the environmental change without really good, healthy relationships. So I will be focusing on that. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just want to ask a question on the GIS stuff that you're doing, and it's fascinating given the time that we're facing right now. If you were, maybe this is putting you on the spot a bit, if you were to make a fundamental recommendation in the context of what's happening now, what would that be from your experience?
A recommendation regarding the GIS stuff, or regarding the entire?
Regarding the entire, what is a key statement you would make in this space, this time of catastrophe, if you like, in the context of the work you're doing?
Thank you for your question. I think legislatively and globally, it's all about the 4 R's, and you might have heard that before. It's reduction, readiness, response, and recovery. And it really needs to be an integrated system. Those 4 things need to be happening vertically throughout councils and government, and also horizontally between the different sectors, spatial planning, emergency management, the sciences, to make it happen. And we can't forget about the reduction or the recovery side of things either. So my recommendation would be we need to integrate all those things somehow. And I believe it's heading that way. It's just we need to get through there. Thank you.
Maybe just to follow up, to make it a little bit more difficult probably, is there a 5th R?
There is no 5th R, but if you have a recommendation.
I was going to say the word retreat has come across.
Absolutely. And if I can add on that as well, that is all through the recovery side. Although there are 4 R's, they're not separate. So a part of that recovery is going to be feeding into reduction, right? So when we're recovering from these events, we need to look at, is it the best idea to build back there? Do we need to look at management tree, etc.? Thank you.
Thank you for your answer. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
There are no questions from the council, but I just have one question to you. While absent from your presentation, did you look at emergency management and the role tangata whenua play in that space?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And absolutely, that is it's a massive piece of it. They're partners in everything that we do. We try to work in a space where we are in support of iwi, of tangata whenua. I suppose, in a way, the biggest goal is that communities have the capacity to deal with events on their own. But of course, we live in a connected world, and there's always going to be a need for support and for wider help. But it's how we support iwi, whānau, tangata whenua in the best way possible to make their journey through what's happening easier. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't think we've got any more questions. So again, I want to thank you for coming and presenting to us, and good luck for the future.
Can I make a comment?
Oh, aroha mai. Maru.
First thing I want to do is commend the Regional Council for creating the opportunity to develop what I would call a succession plan, whereby you have people coming in to deal with the 4 bottom lines: social, cultural, environmental system within. So it's like the council is growing its own, which is very protective against inflation. What I mean by that is sometimes inflation is caused by taxable costs, which is GST. So GST is offsetted by GYO, grow your own. And of course, that's the role of the regional council, is to grow their own. So you have successors coming into it. I'm critical of some of but you're at a developing stage, and some like smart growth. Smart growth was supposed to manage growth, but the property developers and spin doctor lawyers grabbed hold of it and it became market-driven growth. And that's something that needs to be tacked onto, some of those errors in the what. And in terms of tangata whenua, it's not about property rights. It's about customary rights in the lapse of the gods. And so the lapse of the gods means that we have a history that goes from Hawaii, where the first global warming occurred. And if you take that history into account, you would have understanding. And so will the eels in the creek. Have you consulted with the eels in the creek? Because they can tell you whether the river is any good or not. So there's a whole lot of things that needs to be. But you're at the tip of the iceberg, and I commend you for your succession planning. I would put that in terms of regional council. Just those comments on that.
Thank you, Mahi. Maybe Matua Maru is on your list here for the interview. Ngā mihi. Nō reira, ngā mihi kia koutou. Thank you. In your agendas, you would have seen a bio of our next presenter, who is Kate Brown. For those who will be part of the live streaming, I am going to read what's in there because they won't have the opportunity of having seen our agenda. But i te tuatahi, kei te mihi kia koutou tapu tuakana. I also am welcoming my whanaunga, Maggie, who is Kate's mum, who is in the audience. So my haere mai. All right, on Kate Brown. Kate Brown, Ngāi Tarangi Ngāti Pukenga, has led the Global Island Partnership GLISPA since 2009 and is based in Papamoa, New Zealand. She is an island partnership and network specialist, and with GLISPA advises governments, NGOs, and others on strategies for working together to improve the lives of island people across the globe, including on climate change. She is a co-lead of the local 2030 Islands Network, a new network of island economies focused on advancing sustainable development in a locally and culturally appropriate way, and an advisor to a range of other networks and initiatives, including the Climate Strong Islands Network, the Board of Island Conservation, Blue Nature Alliance, Micronesia Challenge, Caribbean Challenge Initiative, Aloha Plus Challenge, Coalition of Fragile Ecosystems, Niue Ocean-wide, and many more. Kate will talk on the outcomes of climate conference of parties in Egypt and highlight what Indigenous and local community islands are focused on in relation to climate change. Later, ngā mihi, Kate. No mai, I'm going to now pass the rākau to you.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's such a pleasure to be here. As Mate Moana said, I am from here, but I've spent most of my life outside of the country. Hence, I have a weird accent, so I'm going to apologize for that in advance. But I actually have a presentation that we're going to go through. I was at the Egypt COP. I'm not going to talk so much about specifically the Egypt COP, but more what other island people and Indigenous people are doing in terms of climate change, both at a very local level, but also at the systems change level. So there's things that we have to do individually and then in our local community, but also at the government level. And I think this thing here will move us on. I wanted to actually also say I spent the last 23 years working on islands, and I spent 10 years in the Pacific working with 21 Pacific Island countries and territories on actually biodiversity conservation. So it was really great to see some of the stuff there, really looking at how to develop national biodiversity strategies and action plans, and then also how to work together to learn from each other and strengthen their international advocacy on conservation and also on their issues and their needs, including resources. And so that's the Pacific. But now, as was indicated, I work on globally. I just came from living for 10 years in Washington, DC, and that's another whole story we won't get into. But we work now with island economies. So it's not just Indigenous people, but it's got a very strong Indigenous values approach, but with places like Ireland, with the United States as a place that has islands, and then with a range of islands across the Pacific. And I'll talk a little bit more about this, but this is the systems change end of what we're working on. I wanted to also, one of the things that's really come to the fore at the international level in the last couple of years, and this is out of a report from Australia, which is interesting, in 2021, is that there's been recognition now that about 80% of all biodiversity left on Earth is controlled or managed by Indigenous communities. That was not in the global, people kind of didn't realize that, and it's changing the way that things are happening at the international level, and the focus on engagement and things being driven much more by Indigenous people in a way that we haven't seen as much. And I think it's important to centre what I'm going to talk about in that thing, because as we know, for Indigenous people, for island people, we don't look at climate change separate to the biodiversity conversation. So all of these things are interlinked. And this is a really important point, because some of the examples I'm going to talk about are about really biodiversity management to strengthen Indigenous people's resilience to manage the impacts of climate change. The other thing, and this is the only slide on climate change, yes, it's warming, it's us for sure, it's bad, it's all of these points. We only have a very short period of time. We're in, so just referring to the climate COP, it's acknowledged that we have probably this year and next year to actually make the tone of change by governments and the commitment by governments. Otherwise, we're heading for a 3-degree world in our children's lifetime, which will be enormously catastrophic. We're not even really sure of the full range of the problem. In the Pacific, they've been advocating for the last 10 years on trying to keep things at 1.5, because that will have an impact on sea level rise, but on water availability, on storms, on the frequency and impact of hurricanes and cyclones. But we already know, a paper just came out that says that we're very likely to hit 2 degrees regardless of what the Pacific is advocating for. And so we have to be really realistic. So we both have to advocate at the international level for that type of change, but we also have to be realistic that we're going to have to adapt. And some of this, I think some of this adaptation is at a scale that I don't think we've really considered. And so anyway, that's all I'm going to say about climate change. I did want to say actually one thing just from the Indigenous perspective. We've all heard of the Paris Climate Agreement. So one of the people that was the biggest champion and is really seen as one of the people that made that agreement happen is actually an Indigenous islander from the Pacific, Tony de Broom. He's actually passed away. He had cancer because he was a victim of nuclear testing in Marshall Islands. But even while that, I think we should never discount how much of a role and how important the Indigenous voice is at the international level in trying to push for this type of transformation. Very much the Pacific has been the moral compass and conscience of a lot of this global climate stuff, including all of the other islands as well, which have less of a focus on Indigenous issues. The Pacific has much more Indigenous people. But I wanted to, I'm going to look at my notes because there's so much to talk about in this issue area that I have to make myself focus. So just hang on, because I want to put all of this in context. So I'm going to look at some examples of what some Indigenous communities are doing in terms of addressing climate change in different ways. One is very local action, like what we see here in Hawaii. The other is, so in places who are contributing very little to global climate change, but who are very impacted by it. So there's a real awareness out there, particularly in islands, that they are going to have to do things different because they're already feeling the impacts, much as we can see in New Zealand. But then the second part of what I want to look at is how Indigenous people are working in coalitions with other like-minded island people, for example, in Hawaii, to do island-level adaptation and system transformation with all sectors, including the business community. I think we heard a little bit from the students about the need for interconnectedness. That's also what we're seeing. And so we're trying to connect the shift on climate change to things like the localization agenda of the UN, which is on the Sustainable Development Goals. So I'll talk a little bit about that because I think it's very relevant to New Zealand. And then we'll talk about how we talk what we learned from Hawaii and other examples, and created this new initiative, which is Local 2030 Islands Initiative, to help other islands around the world to work together and to learn from each other and to have a stronger voice. And that voice is really important because we need to help both internalize this shift that's going to have to happen, as well as push other countries along. We can't do it just at a local level. We've got to take our voice up into a much bigger space. So firstly, starting at a local level, the real, this is actually an example from the most recent IPCC report of one of the approaches to dealing with climate change, around actively revitalising traditional technologies connected to agriculture, aquaculture and natural resource management. This is actually a loka ia, or a fish pond in Hawaii. And Hawaii actually, until contact 200 years ago, was pretty much in balance, had about the same population it has now, was able to sustain the people. Now it's importing 90% of its food and it's a mess. So it's looking at things like this. How can they provide food through the fish pond system? So they're actually rebuilding their fish ponds that they in some ways disconnected from. And that's actually seen as both an adaptation measure but also a mitigation measure, because it has the potential to produce thousands of pounds of sustainable protein annually, but will help reduce things like coral bleaching. We're fairly sure we're going to lose all of our coral reefs. Beach erosion, fish population overkills and other imbalances in the marine ecosystem. So it's really looking at how they strengthen their resilience. This is in the Philippines, mayor called Mayor Alfredo Coro, who we work with. So just to show you that there's all different levels of ways and people that are trying to take some type of leadership on this. They're working on local fisher rights and enabling fisher rights to their marine ecosystem through managed access and sanctuaries, in an effort to try and build the resilience of their local communities in the Philippines, and to ensure that they have food at a local level as climate change starts to worsen. And as a part of, through this, they're actually now building a climate field school in their community to train farmers and fishers to look at how they actually will increase resilience and capacity in their own space. So you see there's very local solutions, not so much always global. But using this experience, Mayor Coro and a whole range of other mayors are now firstly talking about it internationally, but they've joined and started a new initiative called the Coastal 500, which is a group of mayors committed to climate change and resource use fisheries issues across Indonesia, the Philippines, parts of the Pacific, Colombia and Mozambique. It's very random. I had to try and think where these places are, who are trying to work together to strengthen that voice around the protein sources. And one of the interesting things that is a real concern in the Pacific is what the impact of climate change and this long-term overfishing will mean for communities in places like the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea, who are very dependent on fish for protein. There is real concern that those are collapsing, and initiatives like this are helping that along. This is another example who we've been working with. We actually helped them produce a video. If anyone's interested, I can show a video. I mean, I won't show a video, I can share the video of the Tuakina Tribal Land Conservation, which is in Malaita Province in the Solomon Islands. And they're working on strengthening ridge to reef management and actually also trying to understand their traditional practices and approaches and how it might apply in a climate change and world. This village and this next village here, which is Hagaloo Village in the Solomon Islands, are incredibly impacted by mining and forestry pressure from foreign companies coming into the Solomon Islands. But in Hagaloo Village, for example, they're working through a women's group and through the Network for Indigenous Peoples of the Solomon Islands to firstly, they've done an agreement with the provincial government on this specific tree that is in a nickel mining location, but it's very important. They live very high up in the mountains, and the women are now replanting that tree. They use it for housing and all sorts of other things. It has very important spiritual use for them, and they're really trying to push back on the incessant sale of their resources by others. It's not usually by them. It's really fragmenting these communities in the Solomon Islands, this mining and logging. So they're looking at how do they how do they use their traditional knowledge in climate change mitigation, biodiversity loss and prevention? And we have a video from them as well that we helped them pull together, which is, it actually made me cry. It's really moving because it's really people at a very local level saying enough is enough and we can take charge of this ourselves and do something and not wait for other people to come and sort this out. So amazing example of Indigenous communities trying to determine for themselves what their future looks like within a quite difficult situation, I think, within their government. And then I wanted to talk about Hawaii. So I've spent so much time in Hawaii that people think I live there. But anyway, I don't. Hawaii, as a case study, is really the building block for the shift from very local, like the fish pond level, to how you work together in a Indigenous values-based approach to working with the government, with all of the communities, with all of the sectors that can have an impact on sustainability and climate change in the state of Hawaii. So it's taking it from like very local to state level. And I think there's two things. One, which I would like to encourage this council to think about, as part of the Sustainable Development Goals, which I don't know if people are aware of those, but it's what every government in the world has committed itself to implementing. And there's a reporting process on that. It's all voluntary, you don't have to report. But some subnational groups like Hawaii are now reporting on how they're doing on sustainability and using that as a kind of tool for mobilizing the approaches and where there's gaps in their own state. So I think that's really important. And the picture on the left in this slide is the Aloha Plus Challenge mapped out. The Aloha Plus Challenge, which is the thing that Hawaii did as a sustainability commitment and climate commitment, and has been signed off by the governor, all of the elected officials, the mayors, and there's 4 mayors in Hawaii, and also the elected Native Hawaiian at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs. So all of them have agreed that this is the thing. It's developed through a robust community-driven process that took like 4 years to set local goals for sustainability and climate, and it's being measured. But the underpinning of that is the idea here, and the sub-name of Aloha Plus Challenge is He Nohona Aioia, which means building a culture of sustainability. It's a recognition that they were sustainable. They can recapture that in Hawaii, in a place which I said is the extinction capital of the world. I'm not kidding, everything is going there. And they have very many problems. If they have a tropical cyclone that sits for more than 2 days on Oahu, they're going to lose all of their tourism infrastructure in Waikiki. They know that because they haven't been able to manage the watershed. And so there's an enormous amount of interlinked problems there that dealing with just one isn't going to help them. They've got to deal with them all at the same time. And so the underpinning of the culture of sustainability is the idea of the Malama ethic, which it's all building on years of this push on the need to care for Hawaii. There's a really good quote on what the Malama ethic is. I wanted to actually read it because I think it's important. It comes from a Hawaiian leader, Kenny Brown, in 1973, but it's describing the underpinning of this, which is that all of man's acts in Hawaii must be dominated by the spirit of Malama, which means to take care of, care for, preserve, so similar word, because he knows so many ways to destroy its natural environment. We must become its custodian and caretaker for his own sake. He must exercise Malama, because if he starts selling parts of his natural environment abroad for creature comforts, he will lose it all and be unable to survive here. If he uses up his landscapes, mountains, valleys, and vistas, or if he degrades his air and waters, he will destroy the beauty and hence the spirit of Hawaii, and in so doing his own spirit. Malama is thus an imperative. And that's the underpinning of Aloha Plus Challenge. It's those values. I'll talk a little bit, I don't know where we are, maybe. I'll talk quickly about this. So the underpinning of Aloha Plus Challenge is the engagement, the political leadership and local goals. So those two things coming together with an Indigenous driven values process. And so those are all the elected officials, the governor. I am in that photo, but they cut me off, so you can't see me. This is the community-driven process to develop the goals. And interestingly, it was the first time in Hawaii that the people that work on conservation and the people that work on agriculture and who are fighting over resources at the state legislature had come together and developed common goals. And so you start seeing kind of the silo breaking that hasn't always happened and what we need to see for this type of change. And then I think the really important thing that I encourage everyone to look at is the Aloha Plus Challenge dashboard. It's online. Every single person in Hawaii, they have a measurement and tracking process for their goals. Every single person in Hawaii can see what the goals are and how Hawaii is actually doing. And that's why they can produce that report. But if you look here, there's goals on energy, there's on sustainable tourism, on the things that all of those groups decided were the most critical things for Hawaii to deal with out to 2030. Natural resource management, there's a lot of goals. What it's enabled Hawaii to do is to see where there's gaps, where things are not being implemented at all, and to put more resources and attention to that. And at the same time for people in Hawaii to hold their government accountable for not achieving this. And the interesting thing about this dashboard, it's not done by the government, it's done by a public-private partnership called Hawaii Green Growth. And the governor has it on his website. The governor is accountable to this, but he doesn't produce it. So it's a very interesting mix there. And then finally, it has to end in concrete projects in Hawaii. So there's a whole bunch of projects that have been mobilized and on the ground things. Like there's no point having goals set and all these other things if it's not leading us anywhere. And then just quickly, I think what happened, so this was the Sustainability Business Forum that they set up as part of this process. And you can see, you know, there's organizations like Kamehameha Schools, which is the world's 4th largest landowner, which is a native Hawaiian school system that was bequeathed to the people of Hawaii. They're an important part of this. And that group is specifically looking at how they change their business practices and what they do, including looking at payment for ecosystem services, sustainable tourism and other things. The tourism is very unsustainable in Hawaii. I don't know if you've been there. I just was there last week, actually, accidentally. They're trying to transform it. And I think as a result of all of this, Hawaii, for the first time 2 years ago, employed the first Native Hawaiian head of the Office of Hawaii, of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. His name is John DeFries. And they're transforming the fundamental underpinning of tourism in Hawaii into a more local people focused and sustainably focused tourism rather than what you see in Waikiki. So we're actually having a meeting in Hawaii, and I'll talk about that quickly in a minute. But what all of this did is it created this new network. I don't know if you have heard of the Local 2030 initiative, but it's an initiative by the Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations to localize the SDGs. When they're talking about localizing, they're really talking about local government level. In our context, we talk about it at island level and local government level. So we work with both local governments and islands. But because the belief is that all action is happening locally, not at these upper levels, and we need to kind of connect that together. So our network that we started is really looking at this peer-to-peer, how we help people work together to do that transformation, to do what Hawaii's done. So that's our model, and we're doing it in a bunch of other countries. We got support from the US government, so we're rolling along. And then I think the important thing for us is that it's still about improving the lives of people. It's not about making more money. It's not about conservation. It's about people that live in that place. All of, I think the important thing with Aloha Plus Challenge and that, we were talking about the meaning of words like smart growth. We don't tell islands what sustainability means for them. We ask them to tell us from their own process. What does that mean to you? There's a lot of reasons for that. I could do a whole seminar on the crazy naming of things and green growth, blue growth, green economy, etc. I won't, because no one needs to hear it. That's our vision, sustainable island Earth. We keep arguing with people that the islands are microcosms of what the whole world needs to do, and we need to make the shift. I won't talk about that. Our current thing that we're doing is communities of practice of island people. We have actually a community of practice meeting tomorrow on sustainable and regenerative tourism online, if anyone's interested in joining that. But these are trying to help islands move through the process on data and developing their own dashboards. So we have technology with Esri to allow everyone that's a member of our network to develop dashboards. We're looking at this resilient and clean energy systems stuff with support from a US National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and then, as I said, sustainable and regenerative tourism. And then I think the second thing that is really important here, see the gentleman in the yellow at the far bottom of this corner? This is a leader meeting of our network. He's the mayor of the county of Hawaii, so the island of Hawaii, Mayor Roth. And he's sitting at a table with like presidents and leaders of island countries, because in our network, we kind of we let people be in the same space, regardless if they're joining the network at a leadership level. It doesn't matter if you're running a country or not. But the second part, in our network, we're trying to do national implementation and island implementation, but we're also trying to bring together, and that's what we were doing in Egypt, the leaders of islands and island economies, that's why we call it island economies, and mayors and others, to create a place where islands can come together to share solutions and to try and drive change and build relationships for helping progress things like the climate COP or biodiversity or some of the stuff that's become very difficult to move at the international level. This is about building relationships and strengthening a table that island people are at. And our last meeting was actually here at the United Nations General Assembly, and we had it hosted by the Prime Minister of Antigua and Barbuda and Special Envoy John Kerry, and the man on the right is the Minister Aitaro from Palau. So, and actually there's Mayor Roth again at the other end after the FSM gentleman. But we're trying to kind of push up the power lever on this, because having John Kerry at something really does transform. So the US is really all in on this network. I don't know why. And that's some more pictures of different people kind of sharing their thoughts and their solutions. And really what we were talking about at this actually was hurricanes and its impact in the Caribbean, and getting some of these people to listen to each other about what that looks like in reality in your place. Particularly people that are from big countries don't really understand what it feels like to have your entire island lose 80% of your infrastructure, for example. So those kinds of conversations are really important, but also the idea that we can develop solutions together. And then finally, I had so this is again back to the map, but I did have some final thoughts. There are so many parts to this, but I want to also stress the issues around climate justice and equity, which are really big at the international level. But the most recent IPCC report on climate change gives progressive recognition to Indigenous peoples' knowledge, technology and governance principles, both in mitigation and in adaptation action. So there's a big shift going on at the moment on this. It's not just words, it's more about who's driving things rather than how you work with people, but who's actually driving that. And I think that's a huge change. But through all of this activity at the international level, at the local level, we need to really make sure that we don't leave people behind, because I think sometimes it's difficult to engage in some of these things. And also that we don't just look at things from a what we can't do space, or that we don't have resources, but we also look at what are the abilities and special knowledge and values that Indigenous people, particularly, and island people hold, and fully enable that to be part of the dialogue and conversations. And I think that we're often missing that. as part of whatever strategies we do employ moving forward. And finally, we will move faster if we learn from each other, which is why global networks are so important. I know I'm in a lot of global networks, but that's what I do. Thank you.
Wow, Kate, I feel like I've just sat through a university lecture. But excellent presentation. Councillors are wanting to ask questions, so I'm going to allow that. Te Taru.
Yeah, your global reach in terms of indigeneity is impressive. You know, as you go around, and you know the fundamental principles and values of Indigenous peoples around the world. That connection is real. You know, you sit in New Zealand, I'll tell New Zealand, and I've travelled to other Indigenous places as well, and you stand there as a Māori, and they look at you and say, well, you guys are ahead of the game. I look at Hawaii, our close cousins from Hawaii, they'll say that, you know, they'll connect in that way. Looking at what you've got up there, I don't see any placard that says Aotearoa New Zealand in that particular mix. Can you comment on that? I like to think that we are forward thinking, but then when I see and listen to this and the aggregate of work that's been done in the international game, I'm not so damn sure that we're leading in this space, but I'd like you to share your views.
Yes, you're right. I agree. No, so we have been trying to engage with the national government through the Ministry of Foreign Affairs on getting more engaged, and including the US has been reaching out to them as well, and they've kind of been very conservatively oriented on this stuff, I think, unclear why. And yeah, so we haven't really progressed things. And then part of the problem is the only person in New Zealand that can work on this is me, and I'm working internationally. So I'm trying now to figure out who we can help support. We really need someone that has the wants to engage with others on this. And I hear it all the time. People are always asking me, what are other people doing? What are other Indigenous people doing on these issues? I can absolutely help. Connect, do anything. I would be really committed to that. But yeah, that's what been our struggle. And also, I'm from New Zealand, but I've been living internationally for most of my life. So it's a little bit of my own weakness of building that locally. And it's a lot to do with time. I just spend all my time internationally doing things. But I really want to see New Zealand. That's why I'm here at this thing. I want to see New Zealand. I think New Zealand has a lot to offer. Hawaii's trying to, Hawaii keeps telling me, we are the center of, not yet at the moment, but wait, just wait. But yeah, so I think that there's a lot of parallels with that. And there's there's islands that are up there as members, but we're talking to about 30 or 40 other like mayors, groups, countries that just haven't moved into being members yet. Yeah, we're overly networked, basically.
Kia ora koa, nā mihi kia koe mo tō akomama. It's great to hear you called it all. I had a question around the Pacific Islands. You mentioned that they're pushing for 2%, so 1.5. They're nearly resigning to the fact that it's probably going to be 2, if not more. What's the difference in the impacts between a 1.5 temperature rise and a 2?
Yeah, in fact, so the Pacific will not cede on the 1.5, so they still want it to be 1.5. So they have a whole campaign called 1.5 to stay alive. They had it in Egypt. Just before Egypt, the report came out that said that it'll be 2%. We're already past the point that we can be at 1.5 because, there's warming still in the thing we haven't hit. And then we're also not 100% sure how the warming ocean will impact this, because the ocean is warmer than the ocean is warming faster. The biggest impacts will be increasing ferocity and and amount of cyclones and typhoons. So we're just, in the northern Pacific, they say typhoons. Problems with water. So that problem is already happening. Both too much water in some places, as we can see that happening in New Zealand, but that's also happening in the Pacific. There's flooding constantly in some of the big infrastructure in Fiji, like in Nandi, constant flooding. And so they're thinking about rerouting the river, which I think is not a great idea, but anyway. But there's places where there's much more water, and there's places where there's going to be much less water. And then the impact on crops and food availability and fish availability, as well as increasing impacts of sea level rise. There's whole scenarios on sea level rise at different temperatures that you can look at, and the amount of people it pushes into being very vulnerable. And we should be concerned about that in Tauranga, actually, because I don't know what thinking we've done on that, on sea level rise, but it's coastal cities and coastal communities are incredibly vulnerable to this just different temperatures. All of this is so complicated in terms of, like, if there's that, there's this. But yeah, we know the impacts will be make it very difficult for people to stay living in the Pacific. And then that kind of brings into issue migration, because there is some islands, I think, which already have water problems now. And then there's places like Tuvalu is both I don't know if anyone's ever been there, but it's an amazing place. But they're basically, their food things are already inundated now with seawater, so they're having trouble growing food. And then the other problem is just they'll eventually the water will cross them. But the problem is going to be about having no water before it is that they're going to be submerged. Same problem with Marshall Islands. They're going to end up with, Marshall Islands has very little water. Kiribati, if I work with people in the government of Kiribati, they bring their washing with them on trips so they can wash it, because there isn't really much water in Kiribati now in 2023. And but there's a lot of people. So there's just so many problems, I think, that
because you also mentioned that you don't look at biodiversity loss and climate change as separate issues. They're intersecting, so you're treating them the same. I'm thinking the biodiversity loss that has been noticed is in the ocean for the island nations on that land base as well.
Well, it depends. I mean, the food side of things, yes, but a lot of biodiversity, like in the, because there's different types of islands. So the islands with large forest places like Papua New Guinea and Solomon, Vanuatu, they're noticing the species loss. And there's some islands really trying to do something about this, like Palau, about 5 years ago declared a national marine sanctuary in 80% of their waters. They removed distant water fishing nations and fish licenses, and now only have a local fishing fleet that is doing local fishing. And that's part of that is looking at the longer climate change threat, and also the recognition of what their tourism economy is based upon. And then across the whole of Micronesia, they've had a political commitment on conserving their terrestrial and marine resources at different percentages since 2005. So there's kind of some big political leadership efforts connected to on-the-ground implementation that are happening. I mean, there's so many examples, but unless we can influence the change of the global governance system, a lot of that, they're not impacting in terms of creating the greenhouse gas emissions, but they also have minimal impact on reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So it's our ability to influence the other countries, I think, that is really important. That can make a difference to that, and particularly if we're thinking about in the climate process.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate. Sorry, Muddy.
In this country here, we have a political issue, and I was just wondering, how are you dealing with the modern media at this particular stage, because the modern media has a very big political influence. Bad news travel quicker than good news. How are you going to sell good news?
Yeah, I mean, we don't work so much on that. I think it's the people that vote, that I think will be an important part of that. That's why Hawaii's thing is really important, that you can actually see and hold accountable the government to very tangible things that you could just go on a website and see. And you can also input your own data of what you're doing at a school level. We don't work so much with the media other than at the very international level, but I totally agree with you. I think negativity does tend to be the focus, but there are lots of examples of good stories that do make it into the media. I just, for us, the media is really about making sure that the right decisions are being made. And so I think people need to come together and campaign on issues. We've talked about this a lot in the Pacific as well, but we don't always tend to. For example, if we want to talk about kind of more positive things, bring those examples. We try to create our own platform to share those, to be honest.
Well, in this country, it has a big influence on party politics.
Yeah.
Party politics is inclined to follow the bad media. And it's only examples like what happened down in Gisborne where the crap hits the fan.
Yeah.
Where they know, close, there is a global warming issue. And of course, what's happened is there's been a promoting of bad media. I call it the skim, Skype and scam media, has more an effect on what happens in Wellington. Wellington is a snooker table with a few coloured balls, but local politics is quite different to what happens in Wellington, party politics. And it's a big issue because the influence in terms of acts of decree, and I'm talking about some of those acts of decree has turned us into rapists of our fishing quotas and things like that, which are signed off by MAF, and we become rapists of the sea. Whereas once upon a time we used to fish by the moon, the stars, and the breedings, and we didn't touch certain fish, and they were able to breed. But now it's all gun ho.
Yeah.
Sign a document and you can go down and help yourself. So we're guaranteeing to fish out, and that's the type of political.
Yeah, I mean, in places that we work, we've done things like in Hawaii. The reason Hawaii was able to do that is that we took an ambassador from the Seychelles to Hawaii, and he challenged the governor, the former governor, not that one in that picture, and said, you need to step up as an islander. We want to talk to you as an islander, not Washington, D.C., but as this islander. And then he went forward to actually commit to the Aloha Plus Challenge. But before that, not so much. So it's really, I think for us, we really work on the political strategy. How do we help? But that's always driven by the people in that place. So Hawaii asked us to help them and bring someone. And so we said, we can bring this person or we can bring different people. My role actually with a lot of islands is to be external validator of the approach that's been taken, because it's difficult internally for anyone to listen to anyone else. They don't necessarily want to do that. That's why, same thing is why you hire consultants. So we end up sort of like, I've a lot of times been to the governor and said, yes, this is amazing. Other islands will really, we've got to constantly do that. So we work more at that level and less in the media, but I totally agree with you. There's something fundamentally wrong with our whole media system. But I do know that politicians especially, you need good political leaders that are willing to take some risk, and that's what you see in Palau or in Hawaii. But you also need to make sure that the risk isn't going to come back and kind of hurt them. And all of the work that we do is really about building trust, and having kind of similar values. How do we build trust that we are going to do something? We're not going to embarrass these people. We're not going to throw them under the bus. We're trying to move them in the right direction. And then we very much benefited in the partnership I work in by having about 5 political leaders that were champions, and they would go to meetings with anyone and talk to them about the things that we were working on. And so that is really important. It's about how do we move all the moving pieces into the right places. And that's what we want to do. We want to help, not impose.
One last question to Tari.
Yeah, one last question, and I want to pick up on this one because it's very topical from an Indigenous point of view. I want to hear your thoughts from an international perspective. You made comment about, and you've seen some pretty powerful people around your table in the US and so on. You mentioned the meaning of words, and the approach adopted was listening to the people whose words are used in that particular space, and I guess the principles and values that flow from that. What's your thoughts on that from an international perspective, and how's that moving, and how's that being accepted, if at all?
I think that people are far less accepting of people that don't behave well. And you know, in the space I work in, there's a lot of conservation organisations that can almost be like recolonisers in some places that we work. They've got massive amounts of money, and they come and say, we're going to work with you, Indigenous people, and we're going to do this, and we're working in partnership. But I think the world where we work is less accepting of pretending that people are working in partnership, and want to see that being driven by the people, not by someone out of Washington DC with lots of resources, which we see a little bit. We try to hold people accountable to that. I think the trust issue is the key for every element of this. And I think particularly in the global private sector, there's a lot of bad will. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's being done that is not great. And actually, even with some of the governments that are our members, there's some things that are done that are also not great. But we're trying to move them in the right direction, internally and externally. But like people like me, you never see us. We're always behind the scenes trying to make these things, make people move, help people to move. It's very touchy-feely.
Well, I want to thank you, Kate. I also want to extend to you, and I guess at this point I'm probably referring to our Māori caucus and the two Māori councillors that are sitting beside me. And I'm listening to your comments around where is Aotearoa in this picture, and I guess for me, I'm looking at the benefit of our Māori caucus being part of your aim to reach out. We, you know, within our 3 constituencies, within our own hapu iwi connections, this is going to be a very forthright topic now for our own people. And I think the benefit of looking at how we align ourselves to what you're doing with Indigenous people at a global level will have a meaning to Māori here. So I'm sure my 2 colleagues will agree with me that we will reach out to you. We're happy to sit around the table on how we're going to reach out to Māori and how we see Māori driving in that space and Toi Moana supporting in that space. So thank you for coming. Let's have another discussion with the Māori caucus. Let's come back and update Komiti Māori where we get to that, so we can start to have those conversations with our own hapu iwi that participate in our spells. Nō reira, once again, thank you very much, Kate, for your presentation.
Thank you so much. And I was going to say I'm here as a resource since I do live here.
Thank you. Well, councillors, we were going to have our last speaker, but I'm going to change that now. We're going to take a break. It's been quite a industrious morning, so I think you need a break. Let's take a coffee break. I'm going to invite our speakers to join us for morning tea, and we'll come back at what time, Shari? Our secretary saying we'll be back at our table at 22. So we'll adjourn now for morning tea and invite our guests, guest speakers to join us. Yeah. Kia ora mō tātou. We'll now continue our Komiti Māori meeting. E te tuatahi, e te mihi kia koutou taku ina mutu. Nō reira, I've had a request from our chair who is going to do us the honour of introducing you to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors and everybody in the public gallery. As some of you know, I have had a long association with an entity called the Ahu Whenua Competition. The Ahu Whenua Competition was a competition put together by Lord Bledisloe and Sir Apirana Ngata a long time ago, and essentially it celebrates excellence in Māori farming. There are a number of entities and individuals in the wider Bay of Plenty here who have been recipients of that award. And in terms of those who have been to the annual awards dinner, I would have to say it's the creme de la creme of the social event calendar of the year. Absolutely inspiring. My involvement in terms of the journey I've been on with Ahu Whenua, and we have a lot of discussion in this chamber about the social deprivation, the inequality and all that. Let's park that. But in the entities that you see in this competition, the excellence, the performance, the economic contribution, it is really outstanding. But these entities fly below the radar. One thing characterises them. Yes, there has been a whole lot of inequality and injustice over many years, but all these entities look to the future, but what they say is don't forget the past. So one of the transitions we made in Ahu Whenua was in 2012, we introduced the Young Māori Farmer Award, which has continued through today. So with us today, we have Tangaroa Walker. So Tangaroa was the first recipient of that award. It's aspired to by all young Māori now who participate in agriculture. So, and Tangaroa won't mind me saying this, but in terms of Tangaroa's beginnings, he's Tauranga Moana, he's Ngāi Tarangi, he's Ngāti Pukenga. He was born just across the harbour here in Welcome Bay. But if ever there was a recipe for a social failure in terms of this young man, it was probably his beginnings. But despite that, he has excelled in terms of delivery on multiple fronts. And what I did as chair, I offered an invitation for Tangaroa to come and speak to this forum, as well as yesterday he spent the day with the Youth Central Trust, which deals with at-risk youth, and his reception there was outstanding in terms of he's an individual and the attributes that he can put in front of these at-risk youth to say, well, this is where I came from, this is what I've achieved, and I think that's testament. So this is Tangaroa Walker. He's actually a farmer from the deep south, but as I said, he hails here from Tauranga Moana. And for those of you who are interested, and I've given a copy of his, he was fortunate enough to put a book together in terms of his life story, and that is a book called Farming for Life. So I'll get Tangaroa to tell you about his life journey, and please listen with intent. And if you want to read a success book, you read Farm for Life. Tangaroa.
Kia ora for the intro. Is this one? Here it is. Do I need to speak here so I'm being videoed, or can I talk like over here? I just feel a bit rude with my back to everyone, all the kids play.
Sorry.
Okay, see, all good. Kia ora whānau. Awesome to be here. So yeah, as you said, I hail from Tauranga Moana. So mā tātua te waka, takitimi te waka, maua te maunga, tauranga te moana, waipapa te awa, piri rākau te hapu, Ngāi te ranginui, ko Ngāti Pukenga, te iwi, mā Tangaroa hau. So brought up over in Welcome Bay, with all my whānau out there, all the greasy dogs and all my cousins that are there now. But we were just mischief, young kids that used to go up the bush and go up the river and get up a whole lot of mischief. And I was whāngai at birth into the Walker whānau from the Barretts and the Kaupōtea whānau. I got my blonde hair from the Grant side out beyond the beach there, and whāngai into the Walker side, and so sort of brought up at the back of my nana's place. We used to live in a tent there for about my first sort of 2 years of life. We were brought up in a tent out the back of Te Whitu o Te Rangi Marae, and so we went through 16 houses before I got whāngai again by my auntie Piata. So we were living in like tents, sheds and caravan parks, and moving all around the motu. I've been to 6 schools before I rested up and went to my final school up in Whakamarama. So Mum had quite a bad car accident when we were about 4 or 5, when I was about 4 years old, and my auntie come in and took Mum to hospital and realised sort of what we were sort of living in, our living conditions. So she asked my mum if she could whāngai me. So that was sort of a change in my lifestyle and upbringing. That was a bit of a pivotal turn for me, because when I lived up in Whakamarama and I was brought up by people who were probably old enough to be my nana and koro, and so it was real cool. Got taught a whole lot of values. And so when I was living out in Welcome Bay, we were sort of brought up by the whānau, right? So all my cousins used to always knock around my cousins, but we were quite mischief, so we were doing heaps of naughty things. And so my mum had moved out to Te Puke, and we were breaking into cars and getting up to a whole lot of mischief. And I was fortunate that I would go out to Whakamarama from Monday to Friday and go and do my schooling up there, and go out to Te Puke to stay with my mum when she was living out there on the weekends. And so I got to see a totally different side of upbringings, I suppose, from this real humble upbringing with all your cousins to going out and living with my uncle, who taught me how to hunt and fish and live off the whenua and, feed calves and milk cows and all that sort of stuff. And so when I moved up with my uncle, had gone to Whakamarama school up there, my mates were quite wealthy, and I wanted some pūtea to get a lunch order, and that sort of started this teaching about money, because I wanted some flash clothes like them. I was only about sort of 9, 10, and he said, if you want some money, you got to go and milk that cow. So I started getting this cow in and milking her in the mornings, and I did that Monday to Friday for $5 a week. The problem was that uncle was still paying me $5 for till I was about 12, so no pay rise. My mates were getting flasher clothes, I suppose. And so to keep up, he said, you can get another job. And this farmer come walking up our school green, and he influenced me by the way he walked in, what he drove in on, and his beautiful wife that hopped out of the car with him, and the motorbikes that he was going. And so I ran down and asked him what he did for a job, and he said he was a dairy farmer, and that sort of sowed the seed for me. And so we ended up going around, and I opened all the gates for him while he set up the cross country course, and he pretty much told me all about his businesses. So this is Jeffrey whānau up in Whakamarama. So started off mowing their lawns for like $50 to mow lawns, and I was like, man, I'll come down every week. And so I went from mowing the lawns to hosing out down at the cow shed to milking the cows, and over a sort of period of 5 years I was working up there every school holidays and weekends to get some pūtea, and a lot of my money would sort of go to my mum, who was in Te Puke, and help her pay for rent and kai and all that sort of stuff. And ended up went to Tauranga Boys College, played a whole lot of rugby, and I was about 18, and I was 17, sorry, and I said to Ian, I want to be successful. Like I'd seen, he was going down to their chalets for 6-7 weeks over the school holidays, and I was looking after the farm while he went down there with his whānau. And so they had 2 dairy farms, a piggery at the time, a kiwi fruit pulping factory down in Te Puna down there, and also a big mulching company. And so sort of went and asked him how I could be successful, and he said that you need to move away from Tauranga and go somewhere where the grass grows the cheapest. And then I asked him where that was, and he said Southland. I didn't know anything about Southland, Googled it, and found out that there were 3 pubs and about 60 people living in this town. So it was the town of Winton. So yeah, went back, told my uncle that I was going to be moving down south in 2 weeks, and so I started this mission down south and went down to Murihiku, and that was about the same time that the announcement of the Ahu Whenua Young Māori Farmer of the Year was going to be starting the following year. And so I went to a course down there. It was called Farming to Succeed, and they selected 12 young individuals under the age of 26 to go on this 6-day workshop. And when I went to this course, and it was life-changing in the sense that I could figure out how I could scale my hours in the day to get maximum reward, whether it be monetary value or impact to your community. And so went to this course and realised how much I could leverage off winning competitions if I applied myself. And so I entered into the Primary Industries Trainee of the Year, the Dairy Industry Awards, and the Ahu Whenua in 2011 and 2012. And I won 2 of them. The Ahu Whenua and the Dairy Industry Awards, the finals was actually on at the same time. So I had to choose one. And I was definitely going to be entering the Dairy Industry Awards if I didn't bring my uncle, because I didn't know much about the Ahu Whenua. No one told me about anything to do with Māori farming or the Ahu Whenua throughout my whole like farming experience. And so I rang my uncle and told him what I was going to do, and he said, your koro tried to win that Ahu Whenua and he didn't win it, so you better try and win it for us. So yeah, it was Koro Pete. He's brought up over at the island, so he tried to win it in I think it was about 1949, I think it was. Yeah, so he didn't win. Not good enough, is what my uncle said. So yeah, I had to can the Dairy Industry Awards and went and learned about the Ahu Whenua and all of its history, and was fortunate to win the Ahu Whenua in the first year. But what I think what that did for me, and that's why I sort of take my hat off to everyone that starts awards like that, is that you all of a sudden feel so responsible for your whānau and your people, and you feel this weight, which is mean. And so when I won, since I went to that Farming to Succeed course, I realised how valuable knowledge was. And in farming, in particular, we have an issue with scaling knowledge uptake. And we've got technology at our fore, and we hadn't been leveraging our scalable knowledge using technology. And so my kōrero at my winning speech was, when are we going to be using technology to scale knowledge so that we can have a better workforce and be able to share all this impactful information that these presenters gave light to this morning, so that everybody out there in the gumboots can be able to farm forward, but with using up-to-date science. Because the stuff that we're learning in schools and at primary ITO for the likes of is probably 6 or 7 years old, and these young kids are coming through now with this, learning all of this information, but it's probably not going to be out for another 5-6 years, and we need it right now in order to make change. So since 2012, I've got awesome contract milking businesses, opportunities to go contract milking. I actually moved down south to play rugby, but then I won the Ahu Whenua and got offered contract milking jobs. So I went and applied myself there, got to make rugby training to can that. So fortunately, I'm sitting here actually because my top attire is looking pretty good, but down below she's all scabs. So played rugby down in Dunedin and pretty much played on concrete. So I'm a scabby bugger walking in here today. I'm all taped up. But down there, so when I come through the contract milking system, I've seen a lot of knowledge that's at the top and bugger all at the bottom. Everyone's just hands-on, and obviously we've got these huge issues with farming in Aotearoa. It has a big impact on climate change. It's pretty bad that the guys that are making all these errors at the bottom, because they just don't know why they're doing their roles. And so since 2012, I've been trying to think of a way of where we can use technology at scale to deliver knowledge and empower the people that are doing all the mahi and the gumboots. So started off, got a mentor. I've got a couple of mentors from Ngaitau. One of them, his name's Rebecca Hollis, who I've bounced a lot of my mahi off. So he sort of said to me, if you're going to start influencing people, you've got to start a social media page. So in 2018, I started a social media page called Farm for Life, because once you're a farmer, even if you leave the industry, you always come back to it, and it's always with you. So we called it Farm for Life, and the aim was to get 30,000 social media followers, start a website that would then sell merchandise, and then so we did that, got to 30,000 followers. Started a website, sold merchandise, and started creating video content. So we started creating all of this video content. Once we hit 50,000 followers, we were then going to try and start building an app. And so we were then trying to think of how we were going to house all this content. We then built a blueprint of all of this content that needed to be made. So I sat down with who's now my business partner, started off, it was just my advisor at the time, or mentor. So we wrote this blueprint, and we had 6,000 videos that we had to produce. So the blueprint went from like understanding your whenua, right through to how to milk a cow, through to how to calve cows, through to soil degradation, identifying critical source areas, looking after your waterways, looking after yourself with nutrition, mental health and well-being, how to hold a conversation, how to write a CV, all of these sorts of things, and all of these expectations that an employer may have for you as an employee coming through, and how to get a job, everything to do with farming. And so we had 6,500 videos that we ended up having to produce. So we got to 50,000 people, started creating our app. We're into our third app development, because the first two, but they didn't have enough layers that we needed. So now we've built this app called Farm for Life. And so we started the app, it was a subscription pay model. So that's how we were funding it, as well as my contract milking business. We got to a point where we sort of thought we had critical mass of around, we had about 2,500 subscribers coming through. And we wanted to then go to government and try and get funding. So we then had to make it free. And now we're just rolling through a pilot program. So the unique thing about our app, and the reason that I wanted to try and build an app, is I struggled to read and write at school. So until I was told that I had that problem, I was classed as a dumbass. And so being called a dumbass my whole life. Fortunately, I was all right at rugby, so I could hold my own there. But it's not everyone has that ability to get their mana elsewhere within their peers. So I was like, all my mates that were at class with me, who were all dumbasses, we had other skills that weren't being measured at in the school system. So I only went to school for footy, and because I was failing everywhere else at school, I was good at art and all the rest of it, but just really struggled with anything that was written up on the board. And so, but I had all of these skills that I learned off my uncle and down on the dairy farm, and I was like, how can we replicate that? So we created a video learning hub of library of videos that we started off in dairy, but I want to push it out. So we're really starting to work with forestry and sheep and beef. Next will be fisheries. But the interesting thing with this is we can give NZQA qualifications through video learning. So the learner pathway is, we just opened up a gateway for 50 students to come in. So 50, we opened it up, so because of my social media following is about 340,000 at the moment. So it's sort of a a day in the life of Tangaroa, pretty much, and just sort of showcasing everything that farming entails. And like from this, this hui here will go on there because this is all a part of it. Because that everyone's come along for the journey, I suppose, and to be able to dovetail into likes of video learning education, which I don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. When we started, nobody had been able to give video learning that followed through with NZQA qualifications in app form. Still don't think it's been done. So it's been very, very difficult to try and get this going and get somebody to jump on board. Fortunately, we've partnered with SIT and Telford, who they're in a bit of a crisis situation down there at the time, just with numbers as we went into level 4 lockdown. So they just couldn't get any students through. So I said to them, look, if we partner with us, we could deliver your qualifications nationwide. And so that partnership was formed. So we're now going through this partnership where I create video content. I use the NZQA level 3 and egg papers to deliver the content. It's my paperwork. So if there's like a carving a cow video, I'll wait for that to come up on the horizon on the farm. We'll go and get our videography team to come in. We'll video it all, and then following through from that, we've got a voice to text to voice option inside the app, and then, so the questions read to the person or the student, and then they answer via reading to their phone, and then that then gets verified by their employer, and then once that's submitted, so this is all through notifications. The notification will pop up on the employer's page or the verifier's page on their phone, they'll just press OK. Yes, that person has done this mahi on farm. And then once they've pressed OK, then the tutor will get a notification saying that the student has completed, it's been verified by the employer, and then they then to listen to their comments and questions and answers, and then they get the qualification following through from that inside our app. So it was never about doing it for farming. It was more about creating a system that we can use notifications, we can gamify video learning content, and make it fun in a place that everybody spends 6 or 7 hours on average daily anyway, and then try and use our video, our social media platform to make it fun and engaging, and show them that there is a really cool lifestyle to be had working on a farm or on the whenua. So that's what I've been up to over the last, since I won the Ahu Whenua. The reason that this all started was when I was 17, 2007, I had my last rugby training down at Te Puna, and so my theory was on the Wednesday. I went to a Tuesday training, and just as I left, I said kaki te to all the boys down at Te Puna, and Aidan Cooker come up to me and he said, "Don't come home until you've got something for our people." And I didn't know what the hell that meant at the time, so I left and I did my drive all the way down to Southland, and it just sort of sat with me and tuned, and I didn't really know what it meant until I won the Ahu Whenua, and then started the app, and now I feel this is the first formal hui in Tauranga that I've been able to bring something back, and say that I can definitely help young rangatagi who probably don't fit the farming system. And don't forget, farming entails a lot of professions. There's a lot of professions, whether it's been a mechanic, a builder, a plumber, environmentalist, an animal lover, a vet. We sort of cover it all in some way, shape or form within the 12 months. And so by giving this technology, which is free for anyone to download, we can then now give credentials to our kids coming through. The big barrier at the moment is that you can't get a job. You'll struggle to get a job unless you have some sort of qualification, and you can't get these qualifications unless you have a job. So it's there's a big wall there that doesn't work. And so now, a couple of success stories that I like to talk about. There's a young girl, she was 11 years old from Taranaki. She didn't like school, And so her auntie bought her a hub subscription. This was when it was a subscription pays model. She jumped on the hub, watched all of these videos, and went down to her boss. So you can pull up once you start watching the content, watching the content, answering the quizzes, you create your own CV. And so it's all online. So you can go to your boss, to a potential employer, which this girl did. And she's told him to scan the QR code, and it pulled up with the CV on his phone. And look, it's a CV that is hub qualified, not NZQA qualified. We have one course at the moment, just so we don't complicate things. So every video that's in the hub, we've got about 2,500 videos in there now. Every video has a quiz, and each quiz gets saved. So once you answer the quiz, it gets saved to your learning, and it gets time stamped. And so that young girl, this was 2 years ago when we just started, the young girl showed her CV, she got a job, and she already knew how to hose out and dig out the stone traps at 11 years old. So that was one of them. And the other one was one of the recent Ahu Whenua winners was Quinn Morgan. So Quinn was he was an F45 trainer over in Perth. Had been watching my social media page for a couple of years, and he had 3 kids at the time, and wanted to bring them up on a farm. Didn't really like, how his kids were being brought up in Perth, and wanted to come home. And he come home, he was over there and rang me, and I said, I'll jump on and download our app, bro, and watch all the content on here. And so he come over, got a job, moved his whānau over. In there we've got a big segment around leadership and competitions. He watched that content and then applied himself to the Ahu Whenua and was successful. So it's proven that it works, and it's scalable. We just need to open up once we get through this level 3 qual, because we're about 50% or 50% of the way through. So we had 50 people, we had an open of 50 people, 50 students that could apply. I opened it up on social media, and we had about 18,000 people, 1,800 people apply for it off this one post. So it's interesting, the scale of social media if you use it in a good way. So 1,800 people apply for it. Some of them were from overseas. One of the key features with this technology is that you can drag and drop content. So as an employer, so if I was running, so if we did this for Zespri, for example, and I had an opening for, say, 1,000 staff, and I had all the content shot, I could select all of that content and assign it to these 1,000 people who hadn't arrived in Aotearoa yet, and they could watch all of that content at scale, and I could see them all as they went through the content live and how they were going in their quizzes. So that once they got here, they'd already been screened, really understand how the tools work and health and safety around it, and we're familiar with the machinery that we're going to be using. So this is the opportunities that we have with this app is the reason why we went through 3 of them to get to our one that we've got now. So it's 28 minutes. I'd rather an extra 2 minutes for questions if you got some. But yeah, that's my kōrero. This thing is still growing. We've got so many things to still do within it. So we're just working through the gamification of it in terms of like things and bells and whistles going off, rating systems. We're still working off. So we're just coming out at the end of Feb. We've got the ability to take photos and videos and timestamp your achievements. So if I put a post in, for example, I watch the video about how to do it, fill in the question, and then I take a video of the post, and it gets location stamped with the phone and time stamped, and then the verify does it. So that's the next functionality that we're getting, and then into house messaging. Yeah.
Thank you, Tangaroa. It's another amazing presentation. But I just want to express to the councillors, because a lot of our discussions since we've been back from the new year, and some of the terminology that has been placed before our councillors, and I just want to say, what we actually heard today is mana motuhake in motion. So if any of us around the table have become concerned about the language that we're using in council, what Tangaroa has actually spoken about is about mana motuhake. And that is the type of thing that the three councillors expressed to you about supporting Māori in the space. Tangaroa has gone to lengths to show how that can be of value to a lot of our rangatahi. And thank you for talking about your upbringing.
You know too well, Auntie.
I know very well, but you know, it's at times we struggle to explain to our fellow councillors about the differences there are. And some of what Tangaroa has spoken about still exist in our country today of what our young people are living through. And sometimes when we talk about those differences around that table, sometimes it's very hard for us to express. So I'm glad you talked about that, because hopefully it has also opened the eyes for some of our councillors of why we sometimes struggle in the space of expressing the difficulty of the pathway for Māori. And I guess having you talk about it, you're one of the fortunate ones of our kids who have made it. And the beauty of you having made it is now you're sharing the journey for those of our tamariki, and there are many of them who struggle in the school system, who struggle in jobs, who are still in the gangs. But we all have our own different views about the gangs, and I'm not even going to go there. For us, you know, a lot of those are our whanaunga, but that's not a discussion for today. But I want to thank you, because you clearly showed for us as a council that full meaning of manu motuhake, and I want to thank you for that. But the council's not here to listen to me bleed today, so I'm going to go around the table for questions. I'm starting with Te Taru.
Ngā mihi ki a koe e Tangaro, ngā mihi. E tatuna hau ngā whakaro o te tiamana ki a koe hoa, mō reira kei te mihi atu ki a koe. Yeah, it's an amazing story, Tangaro. Your rise from your childhood right through, and the fact that, you know, you make a mention about your own education, you struggle to be part of school and read and all those sorts of things, and yet what you're espousing to us is the height of technological advancement. It's astounding, man. It's astounding. And I, you know, as you were talking, I sort of reflected a little bit, as you do as Māori, on your name, Tangaro. You know, the son of Ranginui and Papatuanuku and Atu of the sea. And you mentioned that somebody said to you, don't come back until you find something. Come back, it's worth. Well, my friend, you've been fishing. You didn't come back with a herring, you come back with a hapuka and more. So look, I just want to acknowledge you for that. You know, and this is, I understand, your first sort of presentation in this context. And thank you for bringing it to this council. It's an inspiration. You know, we can categorize it as a young Māori doing good, but I categorize it as a person who found himself and has actually built himself, and in that sense incorporated the thinking of his whānau, the connection to your whānau, to your uncles, to your koro, you know, your choice about ahu whenua or the dairy. You chose ahu whenua because you are now going to be the one that actually followed the traditions of the intents of your karaua, and you've been a success. And you should always be measured with that. But in that context, you know, like Maki Moana said, it makes conversation worthwhile when the likes of yourself articulates your journey, because that is a learning for all of us. So look, on that, it's not a question, it's just a congratulations, my friend. So
thank you.
Councillor Shirley, Councillor Von Dardelson.
Yes, thank you very much for that, Tangaroa. That was truly inspirational. My first thought was that I'd like to clone you and have you run work and income into the QA, the Tertiary Education, Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Corrections. You know, you're just phenomenal. A really great story. Just on a very specific aspect, though, you mentioned Telford and how with COVID they engaged you with your platform. Is that still operational? What sort of post-COVID is that? Have they retained that relationship?
Yep. So we're currently working with Southern Institute of Technology and Telford to facilitate they're supporting me through this level 3 qualification, and so I'm delivering the tech side of their qual at scale. So they've invested so that we can try and get this thing off the ground so that they can stay alive. And once we complete this level 3 with these 50 students, then we can scale it out to 2,000 or 10,000 if we need, because the shortage in our industry is huge at the moment. So, yeah.
Look, fantastic presentation. Really, really inspiring. Well done, you. And you know, you go further than that, because there's something in common that we have. There's two things. One, I farmed for 17 years, so I have an understanding of farming. But other than that, and it wasn't until you gave me your birthday backwards, which I worked out from 1990, from 89 to 94, I ran the Welcome Bay Tavern, so I know a bit about the greasy gold.
Well, I was that kid sitting in the car park.
You were probably conceived for the car park.
Just down the road.
Excuse me, Councillor, I won't go there.
But there are, and yours isn't the only great story, but it is a great story, and it's something that we can all leverage off. And the other one that came out of the Welcome Bay Tavern era was Victoria Kingy, who's now a very well-known activist for Māori in this area, and she worked as a barmaid for me when she was 18, and I said, you need to go to university and get a degree. They'll back you into it. And she became a lawyer. And so I've always really loved the fact that she actually went on a recommendation. And you've proved you can do it. These are the stories we need. We need the positives. This looking backwards and oh woe is me, that won't work. We actually want Māoridom to achieve, and your story is a great one, and somehow we need to be able to harness that through our organisation, because you do have that local connection, and if we can work with you and as an organisation and harness it, because we've got a lot of young who do need inspiring, and you are an inspiration. Well done.
Thanks, mate. Look, Andrew, I just wanted to I'm being serious here. I've been around the keynote speaking circuit since I won the Ohu Whenua, and inspiration is like a 24-hour glass that if it doesn't get flipped, there is nothing left, and it just runs out for our rangatahi who are inspired. And I was that person that would go around and inspire them, and I literally got sick of it, because I was going to speak to kids and they were like, wow, and then I had nothing. So please, if you are going to use me for anything, don't use me for inspiring kids, because I've got a tool now that when I inspire them, I can give them something that can actually give them something, like a ability to generate an income for them and their whānau. So that's what I got hoha with. I pulled out of this keynote speaking circuit, flying everywhere around Aotearoa, and it just got, it was for nothing. And so now I've got something I can give them, and so use that, and it can be used in every way, shape or form. It's a tool that can be mutated into kiwi fruit, avocados, stone fruit, fisheries. So when you guys get an issue of trying to attract young people, young Māori people who learn in the way that we learn with our hands, think of this app, and we'll have a kōrero. Yeah.
Hello, Andrew. Councillor Lee, sorry.
I've shown all down the South Island. I've been into all the hill countries and seen the changes of the rivers. Like the Rakaia might be 2 chain wide in the summer, and it's a mile wide in the winter. And the different breeds of stock, like the Corriedale, that was interrelated to the land base. But what I want to commend you on it's actually your videos actually challenges the university. The universities are based on theory, but by showing videos, you're actually showing the practice. So you've got a balance of practice and theory. They can actually see it, which is more educational than just theory. So that's a huge advantage. And the earlier comments I was making about the negative media, and that these are the sort of things that overcomes negative media, because it's actually how do you sell good news and how do you sell bad news? Well, politicians capitalize on bad news because it's boat catching and all that sort of thing. But if you give good news, it actually snookers it. So I commend you on your project. Actually, you can see more because there's more kids will learn practice and theory rather than just theory.
I see, I hear you make a few comments around media and good news and bad news. That is the whole reason why Rebecca told me to start a social media platform, because he's seen all the red tape with creating videos and trying to go to government saying, can you put a qualification on that video? Whereas he was like, you need to get a big audience to follow you and then go with that, because that's your mana there. You're not just representing you in your video, you're representing you and the community that come behind you. Dairy it's got a bad name. We've got a lot of challenges, but in order to get them to listen, we have to be a part of them. That's what I've realised. So I'm a part of them, and I'm always going to be on the coalface. But in order for them to listen, you'd have to be one of them to be able to come through with this, all this science and knowledge base. Because when we hear scientists tell us how we should run our farm, they just put their shield up and they get their hackles up and they get defensive. But science is science and theory is theory. There is a X marks a spot within that, and the real world. And by doing live videos on social media, you can't change it. So it is what it is. So yeah, definitely medias and good stories are what make it go forward.
Oh, thank you. Well, I just want to thank you most sincerely for taking the time to come and talk to us today, and also for spending yesterday with Bay Plenty Youth Development Trust. The messages that you gave to the young people, I think, were truly inspirational. And you talked about being tapped out and giving inspiration, but young people need to have a vision and be able to believe that if somebody can do that, so can I, and that gives them a future. So you did wonderful mahi for us at the Trust yesterday, and I really look forward to working with you going forward, because you do practical work on the ground also with youth, don't you? Amazing work down in Southland that we'd like to replicate up here. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, ngā mihi kia koe. I'm always cautious around the use of inspirational stories like what you mentioned. There's some quarters in this country that will utilise it as, oh well, look, he pulled himself up by his bootstraps. Yeah. Well, if you don't manage to do that, that must be your personal responsibility, as you didn't manage to pull yourself out, and disregard some of the systemic issues that hold our whānau in those spaces. And it's not about, oh, woe is me or anything like that. Statistically, they are there. You're a statistical anomaly, but it is possible, and that's why it's aspirational. You are also, as Te Taru said, an example of mana motuhake, Māori solutions for these kinds of issues. You know, mai tō haerenga tēnei. It's come from you, it's come from your tupuna and your whakapapa as well. So that's amazing. I love also how, like you said, often with these sorts of Māori solutions for Māori ways, we make the mistake of having to go to the government to find the funding to pursue that. You have taken the innovation of social media and that platform, as you said, to grow that. That's your funnel to bring into your app. You're the fisherman of the past now. Hey, koena te māuitanga oki, that cheekiness that you have to actually have in your social media to make it work. Because if you don't have that kata, if you don't have that connection, well, it doesn't work. So we're like, oh, good morning, next swipe. So congratulations, my bro. Choice. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou. Yeah, I want to sort of repeat, obviously, a lot of the comments that people have made about the impact you have had and are having. I sort of want to bring it to something. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, perhaps, but I picked up getting values from your grandparents. Things about having role models, for want of a better word. So, and then people who were prepared, like Rob Jeffrey, people prepared to give you a go. You had the vision. I want to drive a good car and all that sort of stuff. So you had an idea where you want to head it to. And so the question I have really is, what, as a council, can we do without getting in the way of all that? We can't deliver values. We can't. We may be able to give people a chance. All right, we had some brilliant presentations from younger people earlier today. So if you get any ideas about what we can do to help you leverage even more, and people who may be other people like yourself.
Yeah, it's a big question. Good big question. Just in terms of like values and visions, with our young kids coming through who we're trying to employ, spending so much time on social media, the algorithms that are happening in behind the scenes of quotes and sportsmen and superstars are out the gate. Like that, you can't beat them. So these kids all already have a vision. And it's all behind the scenes of Google Analytics, and it's pushing quotes and good things in front of them. So I wouldn't say that there's a lack of vision or value. I don't think there's a lack of values that they have. It's just that they're not getting enforced at home. So I don't think we'll ever solve that. But when you put a monetary value behind a value, right? So getting up and shaking someone's hand when you greet them, getting off your ass, don't sit down and shake it and look them in the eye, like that value there. When you tell someone that you could have got a job from that, but you sat down and he went and got the next guy, all of a sudden you put a monetary value to a value, and those kids will churn in because everyone wants to make money because money gets you what you want, and so that's how I think we can do that for our rangatahi at scale. And by there's 6,500 schools in Aotearoa. I'm hoping to get 50 videos, educational videos that incorporate values, how to look after yourself, if you're 16 and going through a relationship, as like a prerequisite into starting the school year. And if we could get that sort of stuff linked in with notifications, how are you feeling, all those sorts of things, and get that sign off. We could start it in the bay. The app is available to do anything now. It just needs all we need is a blueprint. You give me a blueprint of everything that you want to go out to kids, and then I'll write it. I'll write the blueprint and create the videos with the people that you want to be in the video, and I'll facilitate it. And then all we need to do is you can put in regions, areas. You could put in Bay of Welcome Bay, Te Puna, Maunganui. You could put in those areas, and I could set up notifications so that all of those students get notified for that to watch this video, and it could be a part of the school system. Like these are the abilities that this has, and many apps. But we've already got one, so if you want to use it and trial it, then it's there.
Strikes me that perhaps a relationship that we have in this area is with landowners, and spitballing a bit, but it might be that that's a way we can assist, and that we can introduce you to sites for videos for particular issues and things.
Yeah, definitely. Like with the environment, so obviously I'm farming down in Southland. The reason that this app is being a big tool for us down there, we've got the Waituna catchment down there, which is a huge issue for us. We've got a big flatland, and there's a lot of wintering going on down with cropping. So intensive grazing over winter, all that nutrients run off. So apps available to have notifications pinged to and from for each different catchment group, so that those people are informed on how to look after that land in that area because of the catchment group that they work under. Yeah, so it can be mutated in any way. So anyway, I'm well over my time. Auntie's going to kick my ass.
Last one to Tony. Oh, Tony.
Look, just very quickly, Doug mentioned that the Ahufenua Awards are the creme de la creme, and it's a snapshot of how well Māori economy is starting to evolve in these spaces, because I was there as well. It's impressive, right? Been there at a couple of others as well. But embodied in all of that, and I know a number of those corporations and trusts, the Wipere and the Onuku and others, and they have a very strong set of values that underpin. What I'm picking up in your presentation, it is filled with value. You know, you're not just talking, you're talking about the life of children, you're talking about their aspirations, you're talking about applying it, talking about achieving it in a range of different measures. So it's filled with value. And what we talk about here and around the council is value. Not just value for money, is well-being value. So whatever you do to be productive is actually a lot of well-being in that. And that's certainly the case with Ahufenua. And I know part of the measure is well-being and how you're dealing with the land and everything else. So I pulled that from you. So I just wanted to follow up from Councillor Scott's comments about value and how I'm looking at it through the eyes of the Ahufenua and those landowners out there. They're not just doing it for themselves, but they're doing it for future generations, which incorporates your need to anchor your values and to reset given climate change and all the problems you mentioned about dairy farming and the challenges they face. So just a comment before David points out.
So I have to say that Tangara has probably only told you a small part of his journey, what he does within the community. He started a gym when him and his partner first went to Invercargill. Gym's still going. He works in the youth justice system, taking at youth risk, youth who have community service to deliver, takes them out for mahi and works out those hours of community service. So, I mean, that's for another day. So I'd just like to thank Tangaroa profusely. And don't forget, Ahufenua competition, horticulture, ASB Stadium across here. I think it's in May this year, Tangaroa. No doubt you'll be up there for that. So, Chair, there'll be another opportunity to speak to this young man in terms of achievements in the next 6 months.
Cool. Thanks, Lonnie.
We actually are on the home straight. Again, I'd invite you to join us for lunch if you're happy to sit through the last stage of our meeting. We haven't got long, I think we've only got 2 reports. And the first one is the Chair's report. I'm going to hand it to Katarina for these last 2 items before we close.
Tēnā koe Tangaroa. I was writing furiously while you were talking. There's so much potential and opportunity to get some ideas from you and reach out to the parts of our community that you can reach for us. So please stay for lunch so that we can get some more details of you. Kia ora. Kia ora, councillors. So the chairperson's report, I'm just going to take it as read unless you have questions for me. Just take the report as read. There are some highlights. The purpose of this report is to just give you some snapshot highlights on kaupapa of importance, and happy to take any questions.
No questions? Okay. Can I have a mover and seconder then for the report? Thank you, Councillor Ivey. Councillor Lees.
Kia ora anō. Page 18 is our second report, our Komiti Māori work plan. Since drafting the work plan on the advice of our chair, Councillor MacDonald, Councillor MacDonald and Councillor Thompson, who chairs the Strategy and Policy Committee, have met to compare the work plans, and we intend on continually meeting regularly so that we can see where the synergies are, to make sure we're not replicating and that we are supporting each other's work plan. We're also planning on doing that with the other chairs of the other committees so that there is the synergy. I did put in the recommendation that, or in the report, that the work plan is quite flexible. Things will change. There'll be things that are unplanned, like new government policy that comes down every now and then, or there might be, we may not be able to go to a marae due to other events, etc. So there needs to be some flexibility with this plan. And in my recommendation, I'm asking that we can make minor edits in consultation with the chair of Komiti Māori if we need to be flexible. I'm happy to take any questions.
Just before I take the questions, just comment. The reason, as Katalaina has given, for myself and the chair of Strategy and Policy to meet was a recognition of our committees having similar kaupapa. So our meeting was to align our strategies and our work programs so that they were complementing and not sort of riding over the top of one another. So our meeting with staff was to do an analysis of what the our LTP priorities were and where the respective kaupapa we were wanting to achieve through the LTP were addressed through the most appropriate committee. The other reason we had the meeting was our Māori caucus felt that sometimes within our strategy and policy meetings, we didn't have, we weren't able to spend the time to do more in-depth discussion around those matters that were kaupapa Māori being heard within the strategy and policy committees. So through the two, myself and Paula, with our respective committee champions, they were to go away and re-look at both our work programs and come back with a draft of how that synergy can work. What we also discussed was the value too of also meeting with the other chairs of our subcommittees, because we felt that not only should the synergy be occurring through strategy and policy and Komiti Māori, but through our other subcommittees where there was necessity to look at the synergy of what was being turned out in our work programs. So that's really the purpose of that meeting. My understanding that Katalaina and Ramota will go away and re-look at the work programs and then come back to us and let us know what that looks like. I'll pass back to Katalaina.
I'm happy to take any questions.
So the flexibility, I noticed that, for instance, the 4th of April date is also booked out for a financial briefing. So those are things that are going to be jiggled.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm happy to motion that, Madam Chair.
Okay. I have a seconder, please. Councillor McMillan, second. All those in favour say aye. Those against, no, carried. Thank you. Well, that concludes our Komiti Māori meeting. Thank you to our presenters and making the time to present at our hui, and the members of the public who have been watching our live stream. I'll hand back to Te Tari now to close our hui. Kia koe.
Kia ora no tātou. I'll end with this particular prayer, which calls upon the peace of the heavens above, the earth below, and the environment in between. May it settle upon us all, and may we be as one as we consider the totality of that space. Nō reira kei nui tātou. Ke tautarangi Māori, o rangi nui e tuihu nei, o papa tūnuku e takoto nei, e te tai au e awhi nei, ki runga ki a tātou katoa. Tūturu whakamaua ki a tīna, hungi e hui e tāki. Kia ora tātou.
Thank you.